Welcome to the Kings Beat podcast. I am James Ham, Kings Insider for ESPN 1320 and the Kings Beat. Joining me, Mr. Sean Cunningham from Fox 40. What's going on, Sean?
Nothing much. I'm glad to be back. I'm glad to be back in Sacramento after a nice little jaunt to Orlando, where the Sacramento Republic, they came up just a little bit short in the in-season tournament, but it gave me some proper things to think about regarding possibly the Sacramento Kings in-season tournament, which shouldn't be compared in any way to a soccer in-season tournament, but it did give me some thoughts.
Okay, interesting.
I'm good. Yeah, we'll share those later.
All right, and we have Brenden Nunes from the Kings Pulse podcast. What's going on, Brenden?
Not too much, gentlemen. I am also back in Sacramento from a little trip to visiting family in SoCal, so glad to be back and here with you two.
Sweet. We have some stuff to talk about. There is little tidbits of Kings news and NBA news in general, which we'll dive into today. Start with business stuff. If you're sitting here watching on YouTube, give us a thumbs up. Subscribe to the channel. I don't know what we're at 2,100 subscriptions at this point, but we'd like to get up to 3,000 relatively quick. With the season coming, that shouldn't be that big of an issue. We do have training camp just around the corner, so things are going to get lively here, and we will go back up to 2 podcasts probably next week. Maybe the week after.
Next week?
Maybe the week after we'll go back up to 2 podcasts, unless something dramatic happens. How about that? But we're going to keep it rolling. We also will have a Kings Beat virtual happy hour coming up. I am trying to secure an actual date for a guest. The guest that I think I'm going to be able to land is pretty substantial, and I think is pretty cool. So fingers crossed that works out. But these things,
we need to collaborate because I got to find one where I can actually join and have no.
Yeah, what nights are best
things.
for you? Because if I did like a Saturday evening podcast,
question.
I would do a Saturday.
It's just a very tough question. I have to look at the schedule ahead and just go, oh, that one. But no, it's not about me. It's just I haven't been able to actually enjoy the happy hour the right way, the way I should be enjoying the happy hour. So
the way me or Brendan enjoy the happy hour with a drink in our hand.
Correct.
That's right.
Just let it rip.
Yeah. So we're going to get on that as soon as possible. Also, there are, I'm going to throw it down below in the link. We're about to open this thing up for sponsorships. So if you would like to sponsor the Kings Beat podcast, we have all kinds of options and things like that. My good friend John Santiago, who worked with me at Cowbell Kingdom for many years, and was my podcast partner for years, is going to work on the back end of all that stuff. So I'll have a link to, there's a questionnaire you can fill out and send it in. So if you have a business and you want to, jump on board and sponsor the Kings Beat podcast, you're more than welcome to do so, and that should be fun.
Just picture James talking about male grooming habits, and that really would be fantastic.
We want to
in the same
avoid
voice
that
that he
one,
says
though,
our
right?
outlets in.
Yeah, the same voice. I'll talk about shaving my privates, which is
There you go.
Yeah, exactly.
So it's important. It's important.
It
It's really
is
important stuff. Brendan will have a sponsorship of some fancy realtor in town. That would be cool.
Yeah, we won't even get the real sponsor. We'll get the knockoff version, and it'll be even better. Yeah. Well,
Yeah.
Anyway, we would like to sell you good local products, pitch good local services and products to you. So if you have a local business and you want to jump on board with Kings Beat, we'll take good care of you.
The law firm of Dewey, Cheatham, and Howe. Quality people over there. So I can get behind this. This would be fun.
That's awesome. Okay. Outside of that, what's going on, guys? How are we doing? Sean, you had your trip. Brennan, you had your trip. Have you guys survived? Are you back to normal?
My trip was nothing relaxing. It was all work. Someone was because I put out there I was really looking forward to going to Orlando. Last time I had been in that region, I was next time I come back, I don't care if I only have a few hours. I want to see something Disney or something Universal because I had never been, and I know that's like a destination for a lot of people. And so I put it out on like Instagram, and I was like, if you only had 5 or 6 hours, like, would it be worth it? Would you do it? Where would you go? And everyone's like, oh no, don't. Disney's far too big. Don't do that. Don't do that. And most people, I mean, it was really helpful because I was like, yeah, but I'll look back, and even if I had 5 or 6 hours, like I could see at least some of it. They're like, no, don't do that. Don't do that.
It's big.
So yeah, it's enormous. So, and so big, I didn't even see it because it's not like we're near downtown Orlando like at all. So, everyone had the people. I think the most recommendations I had was go check out Universal Studios. So I was like, yeah, maybe I can do that. And it was not really close to downtown. It wasn't really. It just wasn't going to happen. It wasn't in the cards. So then I was like, let me try something simple. Like, I just want to see a gator in its like natural habitat. And I didn't even get to do that. I was so.
Where
we
did
were
you try to
working
find that, Sean?
nonstop.
Like, what was the
okay.
plan to try to find that?
Great question. Thank you for asking. I'm so glad you did, because I looked at every single. I thought like every pond, river, which there's a lot of. If you just fly over Orlando, you see like lakes everywhere, and I had read. So I started doing like Gators Orlando, and I started looking like all these stories, like just news stories about like, oh, this gator was spotted here or this whatever. So I'm like, dude, there's like gators everywhere. I think the most I saw was like a freaking turtle. One was like 1,000 years old because it was enormous, and it was like it looked like a sea turtle living in this little pond that it probably should. Like every other turtle around it looked like normal. Okay, oh, look at these turtles. That's cool. Then you saw this fucking guy creep to the surface, and it looked like a dinosaur. So. That was as close as I got. But we were looking, Chris Tavares, who I work with at Fox 40, we were looking around everywhere, like trying to find different places to go to see like gators. And I didn't want to go to like some, hey, come to this gator farm where the guy has like 3 fingers and he's showing you, oh, you don't want to do this, and check him out. Let me put my hand in his mouth. I'm not doing that. So I just wanted to stay in my car, our rental car.
Honk at him.
Just
at a
like,
gator.
oh shit, look at that. He's over there like sunbathing. Like that's all I wanted to see. I'm not getting out. I don't have like that adventurous spirit. I'm not like trying to die. So that's what I wanted to do. We failed. Dude, I had about 2 hours where
This is hilarious.
Yeah,
I can't wait for Sean's trip to Miami, where he thinks everyone drives a Lamborghini and snorts cocaine, or he goes to LA and just looking for girls in bikinis everywhere.
Well, I've been to these places. I know my way around those places. I've actually been to Miami a few times, but no, I'm like I wanted to see these things. Chris was down. He was like, "Yeah, let's do it." And
let's do it.
We failed. No, we failed miserably. And actually, the only time that we really had to kind of explore, and you guys know how I like to, maybe go out and enjoy the people. I had about an hour and a half before last call because of the 3-hour time difference between Sacramento and here, Sacramento and Orlando. And so, yeah, I didn't even get a chance to go out and have a proper drink and kind of get to know some of the sites. So, yeah, man, tough. It's first world problems, though, but it was fun.
I just read the title of this story. I didn't dig into it, but a guy decided he also wanted to like check out the Everglades, and so he went hiking, and an alligator ate his arm.
Nope.
Literally
not doing
that. Bit his right arm off, and he ended up lost in the Everglades for a couple of days and somehow survived. But yeah. That could have been
Man
you,
in
Sean.
Florida. Man in Florida. Dude, that's the headline all the time. Man in Florida. That's what it is. It's Loveline. If you ever listen to Loveline with Dr. Drew and Adam Carolla back in the day, Brenden, Loveline was a radio show when radio actually had talk shows, and people would call in with relationship advice. Hey, I had this bump on my private area. What is it? And Dr. Drew could help diagnose it over the phone. All kinds of great. It was a great radio show. And they played a game called Germany or Florida, and it would have headlines, and people would guess if it was Germany or Florida, and it was always Germany or Florida. So, yeah, man, it's crazy out there. It really is. But I had a good time. The Republic, good for them, man. On a lighter note, good for them. Taking down 4 MLS opponents is going to be obviously something that they shouldn't do, and their run came to an end at the championship level, and they do get rewarded handsomely, which is great for that organization and for those players, but they were going in there hoping to win, and I think for about 70, 75 minutes they had it, and I'm not the biggest soccer guy, but it certainly captures your attention.
Yeah, it was a mistake by defender. Just
Right.
tough.
Yeah, it was bad. Real
Yeah,
bad.
just bad. Yeah. And then compounded with another one right afterwards. Same defender. Yeah, unfortunate for that guy. He kind of blew it. He let
You
him down.
blew it.
Yeah. You know, like I coached soccer for so long that there like situations just happen. You know, the ball is shooting all over the place. It's flying all over the place, and sometimes, you know, you stick a foot up to clear it, and it goes off the wrong side of your foot and flies into the goal, and there's nothing you can do about it. Yeah, feel bad for it. Brennan, you're surviving. You got back from L.A. Everything's good.
Yeah, enemy territory. It's always funny to me walking around LA or surrounding areas wherein if it's like King stuff or it used to be Celtic stuff or Niner gear, it seems like I'm just uh, affiliated or fans with like all the most possible rivals of every LA team, and that's where I have a lot of family. So always fun. It was not great to watch the Niners game. They
Yep.
kind of the slip and slide. It was a mess of a game. You even saw like on the sideline, the actual line was just nothing close to straight, and it was just a mess of a game. Hoped for a better Trey Lance debut, but still hopeful. Yeah, I'm actually going back again this next week. My dad's gonna have a surgery, and I'll be down there right until the leading up days till training camp, but then or media day. But then we'll be back for that and ready to get next year started.
Yeah, that's right. Okay, so let's get to some of the news. I mean, there's little tidbits of information coming out right now. The Kings haven't completely finalized their 20-man roster. It's really close to finalized, and it pretty much is finalized, but because they still had guys like Kaziak Paula, who had not come into town and actually signed his contract, I think Quinn Cook is another who has not been into town to sign his contract. They still had the ability to go out and do a few things. One of the
No,
things
well,
they what's that?
Quinn's here. Quinn's here.
Well, he's here. Has he signed?
No, but he's here.
Okay. Well, interesting. So I haven't seen Quinn. I haven't seen a picture of him or anything else. So no, that's good to hear. But the Kings also they made a move this week to bring DJ Steward back, and then waived him. And I think it is confusing for a lot of fans, but I'll touch base on it really quick. It's sort of a salary cap situation. So if you give a player what's called an Exhibit 10 contract, that is a contract that basically it's when you waive them, you can make them like one of your franchise players that you shift down to the G League, and if they stay in the G League for a certain amount of time, that's if they clear waivers. If they stay down in the G League for a certain amount of time, then they get like a guaranteed, you know, like a bonus. So the most you can do for that is I think it's $50,000. That's not what the Kings just did with DJ Steward. What they did is they gave him a standard everyday contract, and it had a $50,000 guarantee, so they could actually skip that whole waiting period, which at this point would be about 3 months because he'd have to wait the 60 days, but camp's not starting until later. And so basically, they're hoping that he'll stick around and become a Stockton King again this year. Stockton Kings own his rights as long as another team doesn't sign him to their parent club between now and the start of like the G League, then his rights would go to the Stockton Kings. But that extra 50 grand is living money. It's money to keep him going here in the States until he starts getting paychecks in the G League. And so that's what that move was about, is about keeping a guy in your system. And hopefully that's what will happen with him. Just what are your guys' thoughts? Anything interesting there with DJ Steward?
I mean, I like that they're just rewarding a guy, giving him 50K and kind of hoping to keep him around. I do think that there's, I don't love Quinn Cook or Matthew Dellavedova. And is there a world where DJ Stewart becomes your third string like later in the year? I think that is within the realm of possibility. I still obviously would lean towards expecting Cook or Delly to be that guy. But I like that they're rewarding the guy, and obviously I think makes me have a little bit of a closer eye on Stewart. And in my mind, this means it's somebody that they value a little bit more than, maybe not more, but someone that they do value on their Stockton roster a decent amount by being willing to give him this. So somebody I'll keep a little bit of a closer eye on and see how he kind of progresses moving forward.
Yeah, it's a
Yeah,
little bit of it's a little bit of insurance.
yeah,
I think Stockton is ultimately where he will be, and it's a way to just reward him a little bit for the work that he's put in. You're talking about 2 summer leagues, 2 summer camps, 2 likely training camps, and you know, training up to a point of training camp because obviously he was released, but you have those guys around there, and we talk about Exhibit 10s, and usually they tend to go to players that were within your camp, your workouts, summer league for that matter. I think the 2 will be in summer league this year, and if I was a betting man, it'll be someone like Jariah Horn or even Alex O'Connell or possibly both. And these are going to be players that you'll see at the Stockton level. And famously, I like to talk about the Gabe Vincent situation where he was under your control. You had him at Stockton the year going into training camp. You signed him, and the next day you cut him. And that was an Exhibit 10. It was literally just a money move to be able to reward him for some money. So these things happen, and it's not really. I understand why people kind of get tied up into it because really any kind of Kings news, people tend to perk their ears up. But when you're following along, it's a lot of these things don't necessarily happen yet because of the fact that the salary cap really beyond this year hasn't really been totally finalized. And in when these contracts were announced, like you have agreement in principle and they just hadn't been signed yet. They hadn't officially been announced by the team, and that's the reason why. It's because you don't have total finality on the numbers. So, but it's all expected. Like you have an agreement in principle. This person will do this. They'll be in camp, or they'll be at the Stockton level, or what have you. And so, the ones that are secure should tell you a lot because there is a pecking order there, and that shows what their priorities were going into training camp. Coming out of training camp sometimes can differentiate from what those priorities were going into camp.
yeah. I like Steward. At least I like the potential of him. I still think he's really, really raw, and you're waiting to see what he's going to become. But he averaged over 14 points a game last year in Stockton, and he's only 20 years old. And there's plenty of time to see what he becomes. He's a Duke guy, so Sean's always going to hold some sort of place in his heart for him. Yeah,
So
the
is
move
Quinquet.
it's yeah, the move itself. I think it's interesting. I think this year more than any other year that I've covered this team, it kind of feels like they're fully invested with the back. Let's just like from 12 on the roster to 20. It seems like they're more invested, and I don't know why that is. But we're seeing guys like Chima Moneki, who's never played in the NBA, he's never even played in the G League, got 250,000 guaranteed to come to camp. That's not typical. And we see a guy like Sam Merrill get 150,000 bucks to come to camp. Like it feels like the Kings are competing for just better depth. And the problem is that once you give a guy a certain amount of money, whether he's eligible to be shipped to the G League or not is like it's an area that we need to dig deeper into. So it's very possible that again Merrill and Moneki won't be in Sacramento, won't be in Stockton if they don't make the team. But I also think that just like by going out there and bringing in better competition, you're actually showing that you're trying to improve that back into the roster. We talked about it. The team that started the season 2 years ago, we had Daquan Jeffries, Justin James, Kyle Guy, and one other that all were undrafted or second round picks in the previous 2 drafts. Oh, maybe it's
Jemias and Robert Woodard, maybe.
Yeah, Jemias and Robert Woodard.
When you said undrafted, I was like, who is he talking about?
Well, no, Daquan Jeffries, that's who. And then Kyle Guy was a 2-way, right?
Yeah, he was drafted though. Him and Jason,
Yeah,
or Justin James.
Yeah, the only one that was undrafted was Daquan. But when you start a season with 4 guys that are basically second round picks, unproven talents, second round picks or undrafted players, not like overall, but in the previous 2 drafts, that really does weaken like your overall depth. If you have a couple of injuries, which of course they did, or if you have veterans that just don't fit, they really like limited the options for Luke Walton and his staff. Like, what are we supposed to do here? Who am I supposed to turn to? I just feel like this year it feels like they've put a little bit more time and effort and thought into that back end of the team. You guys feel that?
I don't necessarily feel that way. I think they do every year because you want to have depth and you want to leave no stone unturned. And if you have guys that you like, that you should see it through. You kind of want to provide them with an opportunity, and I think maybe we just kind of know a little bit more than you have in previous years. I also think that by virtue of not really having second round picks, you kind of see how they don't. I don't want to say don't value the second round pick, but they just, I think they feel that they can get guys that they would like without a second round pick, if that makes sense. And I think they want to see what it looks like. And I think obviously, like I kind of mentioned those priorities, and I think that's kind of like a little cheat code, a little bit. Like just look at the way the signings have happened, and I think you prioritize certain things over others, and certain guys you think will be there and won't be there. It's almost like a draft where, boy, can we wait till September, get this guy cheaper, or do we have to do this now before we risk losing him? And you could potentially lose out on something that you feel would be an immaculate fit for your team. So I think these are all part of the thought process and the strategies that all teams do. I mean, you don't have to look very much further than the Miami Heat to see the way they value these players. And I think what it means also, guys, is the fact that, I don't think they feel that there's a huge drop-off from 12 to 20. Maybe some, the really, really good teams do have a huge drop-off from 12 to 20, maybe very top-heavy and top-loaded. And I think once you get past 5 on this team, you just have a bunch of guys that are kind of swimming in the same pool, if you know what I mean. So I think that provides not only opportunity that you have to, no stone uncovered, but it also provides opportunities for players to say, man, I could come here and I can be maybe something quite special. I might have kind of and when I say that, I don't mean necessarily like an all-star caliber player, but possibly a rotational player, maybe somebody who can put together 3 to 4 years of stability within an organization and find a role where they're not searching every single year for a home. So I think both can be attractive to each other.
Yeah, even an opportunity to show that
Right.
you're a player. I mean, I think that's what team. I think there are a certain amount of players that are looking at the Sacramento Kings right now and like, we know Harrison Barnes is going to start at the 3 and play a bunch of minutes, but who is going to be his backup? Herter's going to eat some minutes, but like, who is going to be his legitimate backup? What if he gets hurt? Who's going to be there? And I think that there's like players that are like, I think I would. It's a good spot where I might be able to get enough runway to prove to people that I'm a player. Brenden, where are you at?
I think we need to stop just walking around the name and just say it, fellas. Like Keon Ellis is obviously what we're talking about here.
They're just holding out until Keon is ready. That's it.
I do think that he's somewhat of an example of maybe not valuing second round picks as much because you still feel like you can get a guy you like afterwards. There's a lot of scenarios where second rounders maybe decide to, and I don't think that this was the case with Keon, but I think there are scenarios where guys decide to not get picked in the second round. So that way they have their choice of a landing spot in undrafted free agent or undrafted free agency. I think that's the right wording there. So I think that that's a potential example. And I think when it comes to sort of the depth of this roster, like there's, 8 to 10 guys that I feel confident are rotation players. And then I think it's really healthy to have that competition in training camp. I think that's something we've seen the idea floated around a lot. And I think that healthy competition is important, that even if one of these guys from 12 down to 20 ends up becoming a player that you can put in a rotation and rely on, that is a success. And I think that the best way for that to happen is to feel like, okay, well, I have to beat out this guy who also is good competition and vice versa. And that just leads to everybody sort of ideally becoming the best version of themselves and hopefully therefore making the team the best version of themselves for what they could be right now. But I think that it is a little different than what we saw last year, where it seemed like there was times where it's like, okay, we have this spot that we need to figure out how to fill. And there's options that maybe we don't love, but one of them is going to have to do it. And I think it's almost a little bit of the other way this time. Like I think of Terrence Davis specifically of, I think he's a good player that we need to find minutes for, but we don't even exactly know where to put him. And I think it's definitely a better problem to have than what it was in years prior.
Yeah, I think it's interesting. Like, I remember, like, one season, what did they bring in? Like, Eric Micah. And that's it. Like, they didn't get up to 20. They came to camp with like 17 players or 18 players. And that was all they did. And then maybe at the last second, they did sign somebody and waive them so they could, get them on their G League squad. But there wasn't a bunch of like competition at the back end. And again, you're going to pay Chima Moneki $250,000 to show up to camp. That's a lot of money for a guy who's played overseas, went undrafted, went to UC Davis. That's a lot of money. And I'm not saying that I don't like Chima Moneki or that I don't think he'll make the team.
I
think
don't know. There was a tone.
No,
I'm
no.
kidding.
I did I was doing training camp battles, right? I'm going position by position. And I think the small forward position is probably the most intriguing of all because, well, the small and the power are both going to be like really, really strange because we know that the guards are going to bleed over into that small forward position. So, like, Herder's going to play plenty of small forward. But, like, when they signed Kent Bazemore, I think people around Sacramento just automatically, hey, Kent Bazemore's back. He's going to be on the team. I don't know that Kent Bazemore is going to be on the team. Like, they have to make 3 roster cuts. And I think we can look at the Dellavedova Cook situation at this point guard position and go, okay, one of those guys probably isn't going to make it. And possibly 2. But then where are you going to get those other players? And I'm looking at the depth chart and I'm trying to figure out like who makes sense. And then, Moneki is a guy who like he can play the 3 and the 4. So it's like some versatility there. He's undersized, but that doesn't matter. He's a bit of a crazy athlete. And then you've got Casey Okpala, who fully has he's basically Mo Harkless body, who just doesn't have any experience because the Miami Heat never let him get on the floor. And you start looking at these guys like, who is going to make it? Sam Merrill's up against it. And I'd even say, Brennan wrote about Chimezie Metu, and we'll get into him later today, but Chimezie's got to be in the mix of how is he going to fit with this puzzle? Does he fit? Will he get an opportunity? Or is it possible he's a training camp casualty? I think that there's all kinds of things that could happen here. I don't think I've walked into a camp thinking, oh, there's probably, there's 6 players for 3 positions on the roster, and I don't know who's going to make it like this year.
Do you think that this is possibly like a function of Mike Brown? I mean, there's 2 new members that we're talking about that are from the Nigerian national team that he was a part of. Like, where do you think that this difference is coming from?
Well, I certainly think when it comes to Chima, Mike Brown made the call. Like, he made the call. I read an ESPN article where they talked to Chima about this, and they specifically said that Mike Brown reached out to him the day before he actually took the job.
Yep.
And I hadn't dug deep into it. I mean, again, I think some people should look at this. We're discussing like 5 or 6 or 7 players who may or may not make the team, but who probably won't play this season hardly at all. They'll have and if they do, it'll be a role, like a very small role that they'll have. So, I mean, this is what happens in September. We have these long conversations about guys who, how much do they matter to the overall scheme of things? I'm not sure.
At nauseum, James.
No, we do, but you understand what I'm saying.
Right.
This is different. To me, it is different because I don't remember a time where this many players were fighting for an actual roster.
You go into a typical camp and you go, oh, there's your camp meet. These guys are the 3,
Yeah.
and really, there's just more of them. There's more guys where you're looking at and you go, okay, well, which one's going to remain? I think there's a little bit more. I think it's easy to identify who's in the mix, and quite frankly, I would include some of the lower end salary guys on that as well. Someone like, we've talked about Trey Lyles, you mentioned Chimezie Metu, even Alex Len, where you kind of look at some of these guys and decide, there could be a decision to be made, or maybe there's a move that's made elsewhere. And I also think don't forget they're also going to see what shakes out of other teams' trees when they have their camp cuts. So yeah, man, it's all part of it. It's just all part of it, and clearly, like you put the team together, Mike Brown's going to have some influence over it, and he's going to obviously have control over the roster in terms of who plays and who doesn't. So this is where it gets fun, fellas. I'm looking forward to it. This is going to be fun, and it was actually kind of funny. I just after I got back from Orlando, I went out to that harvest block party that they had outside of Golden One Center. I actually had a chance to catch up with Chima Monecki, and it was a lot of stuff of what he's saying. Thinking that he can be a fan favorite in this town. Having that kind of blue collar style of play where he could instantly stand out. I could envision it. I just don't know, what it looks like in terms of playing time and all those things. But that's not sounding to me like a guy who thinks that he's just happy to be here for the opportunity and see what eyes he can put on him before the end of training camp. He's talking about being a fan favorite, being a how everyone's on this one line of breaking this playoff drought, which of course they say every single year, but you've got a guy who literally just stepped foot. You don't know if he's totally going to be here, and he's sounding like a guy who's overly confident that not only that he will, but that there's going to be this playoff streak is going to come to an end. There's some confidence there, and some confidence from a guy who's never even sniffed the NBA. So that's it's not only was it amusing and entertaining, but it was wow, good for you, man. That's probably the right attitude to have.
It's funny you say the term training camp meet, and that makes perfect sense to me. But you're gonna pay a dude $250K. That's like some filet mignon,
Filet mignon.
Yeah, that is some expensive. That's a really nice filet mignon that you're looking at right there. That's.
But in NBA terms, it's not. In NBA terms, it's. I mean, I get what you're saying.
It's not something that we've ever seen before in Sacramento, where we've seen them give $150K to a guy to come to camp like Sam Merrill, where there's like 14 other shooting guards in front of him.
Well, and to that point, like that's. What do you call that? You grease the wheels a little bit, right? You're hoping that you're able to land this person in your G League program if something shakes out. If you're not able to keep them, and maybe you have some goodwill built up there, if you will. Not only that, though, like that also should tell you that they're probably pretty committed to that person. Not so much Sam Merrill, in my opinion, but as opposed to somebody like Chima, who, that report is accurate. Where Mike Brown, had I mean, they had to chase down Gabe Vincent to get Mike Brown Chima's number again. Like that's how it happened. So it's like these people are telling you the truth and believe them because they prioritized him. They made him a priority. So the fact that Chima Monecki has a serious chance of making this team is probably accurate based off of the experience he's had with Mike Brown, the pot commitment that they've given him contractually, and using outside means to chase him down. So I'd believe it when they're telling me that they like this guy.
Brenden, is there a player? Is there a player that you've watched Chima video? Is there a player that you comp that you like with Chima?
I don't know. I was just going to say, like, Chima feels like the biggest question mark to me. He's the player that I have the least understanding of with him being overseas. I've only seen a handful of his overseas games, and I honestly wasn't all that impressed. Like, I thought that defensive engagement was a little bit of a question mark at times, which is something that scares me, or I guess maybe triggers me from previous Kings rosters. But he is the one that I admittedly have the least understanding of, and it's hard to draw a specific comp. I'm going to try to rewatch some of those Nigerian national games where Mike Brown was actually the head coach with these three different guys, because I think that that's good context for how he specifically was using all of them as well. But I think out of all of them, even like Sam Merrill, I'm fairly familiar with from his time at Utah State that he was with Cada as well. But Monecki definitely, in my mind, is the biggest question mark that I don't know what to expect from at this current point.
I was watching film of him the other day, and like a player comp, and like first of all, like he's we don't say his name at this point because of situations, but the other thing is like don't get carried away about what I'm saying here. Like he kind of reminds me of a poor man's Miles Bridges. Like his ability to get off the floor is nuts. He plays with a reckless abandonment on the run. He can shoot it from three, but sometimes it gets a little sloppy, it gets a little crazy, a little out of control. Every once in a while he'll do a highlight block. He has that kind of feel to him as a player, a guy who will get a ball and in the middle of the key, and he doesn't even care who's in front of him. He's going to go up and try to hammer it down off of 2 feet, and that's kind of like the feel for him that I've been getting. But again, it is kind of all over the board. Like he's a player who's playing against much lower competition where he's been, and I kind of want to see how it translates.
I think you're looking. Yeah. James mentioned obviously you're looking at three dudes. Hold on one second. Sorry, I had to clear my throat there. I think there's three dudes you're looking at obviously having to trim, and to me it's very simple when you look at Chima and KZ. There's a decision to be made there. You have a decision to be made with Quinn Cook and Dellavedova. It could be both, although even if it was both, I think they would probably bring in another guard. So if they do cut Quinn Cook or Dellavedova, then you're bringing in probably another guard that has been cut from another team, if that makes sense. Like I do think that they would do that. I don't think that would be DJ. And then I think it's Sam Merrill. Like I don't think Sam Merrill will make this team, and I think they have aspirations for him to be part of Stockton. So really those are your five, if you will, that you can identify as your quote unquote camp meet. Now we can all make predictions here. To me, I think it's going to be KZ, Dellavedova, and Merrill. And I say that because I don't think Quinn Cook at this point, I don't think he's going to have a terrible training camp for one. I think they're gonna bet on his expertise and readiness a little bit now, and obviously the 3-point shooting. I don't think he's going to factor much into the equation in terms of a guy who's going to go out there and play very much during the season. But I do think that Quinn Cook has done enough to where he doesn't warrant being back in the G League. And Dellavedova, I'm just betting against because I just don't think the guy can play anymore. So all due respect to Delly, I just don't think he's there in his career. I think his career is behind him. So that to me, I don't know if you guys, if you're out there trying to put predictions together, but if I was betting on it, I think it's an Okpala, it's a Sam Merrill, and I think it's Dellavedova that are gone.
Okay. Brenden, where are you at with that?
The Okpala one is a little shocking to me. I think that I would lean Okpala staying, and I kind of think in my mind the battle is Mezzi versus Monecki. I also did a little bit of a 180 on Mezzi throughout the course of last year. Like I really liked him at the beginning of the year. I thought he was somebody that was happy in the opportunity that he got and did a decent job of taking advantage of it. And then it was almost like his tone shift a little bit. I don't know if you guys felt the same way, where it was like a frustration that he wasn't put out there, when I don't think that the times that he showed in those, like that 5-game stretch that he was the starter, that was kind of Walton's last lineup adjustment. And then after the 5th game where they were supposed to reevaluate, Walton was let go that same time. And then Mezzi gets benched for 2 games and then comes back and starts for 5 and then is benched for 2. Like I get why it was frustrating from his point of view, but I don't think any of the time that he was out there, he ever did anything that was impressive enough that in my mind where it's like, you have to find minutes for this guy. I honestly thought he was a negative more often than not, outside of a quarter here and there where he's maybe hitting a lot of these tough shots. But I definitely see the upside with Mezzi, but I could see them saying, okay, we've kind of seen enough, and it hasn't been particularly what we like. And again, Monecki's a big question mark for me, but I could see I'm kind of over Mezzi, to be blunt.
Oh. I think Sean has been over Mezzi a couple of times, like I was with Buddy Hield. There are moments where you're like, okay, man,
Yeah,
what
he
are
does
you
some
doing?
he does some frustrating things,
Yeah.
and look, you're rooting for a guy like that because he's got to make the most of opportunities, and I think he's had some really shining moments. I really do.
Yeah.
But he tends to catch the eye as a mistake player, a guy who doesn't necessarily do the right thing all the time, and you can see the coaches calling him out a lot of times when there's moments, even teammates. So it's just part of his progression, and yeah, I don't necessarily disagree with you either, Brenden. I think, like I said, I almost feel like someone like him, Alex Len, and even Trey Lyles are in a different category of player, where it's like, here's your camp meet, and then here's your kind of how do you fit based off of the commitment we have to you. Like if you were to, go out there and make a trade for Trey Lyles and have a future second, something like whatever that ends up looking like. I don't know what it looks like, but just some minimal deal where you make a move, or something like Chimezie Metu. Like, is it a move? Is it just a cut your losses deal? And getting rid of him might be able to even salvage one of these other 5 that we've talked about. I don't know quite how it looks, but I do put them in a different category because there's some more calculus that gets involved in terms of the money that's owed. So I don't disagree with you, man. I think that's wise.
Yeah,
I do
I'd say
think-
this. Go ahead, Brenden.
Real quick, I do think for what it's worth, like Mezzi is a guy that if I have to pick who's going to benefit the most from playing alongside Domas, who could, Mezzi is right up there. Like I think that his athleticism and size makes him a really good cutter and finisher around the rim. Like we saw it just in that very first game that they all played together. Mezzi had a couple really good cuts, and Domas is going to reward that. He shot 68% at the rim last year, 71% the year prior. Like those are phenomenal numbers at the rim. And of course, volume matters when we're talking about this. But I think it's just like, is that 3-point shot going to go down? Because you can see the flashes where it's easy to buy into Mezzi. If you just look at Mezzi highlights, you're like, holy crap, this guy could really be something at this size with this type of creation and shot making ability. So I can totally see why people will buy into the upside that maybe he will have that advantage over other people. It's just consistency for me.
Yeah, and I'm going to say, like, when it comes to the veteran guys, Sean, you brought up Alex Len, you brought up Trey Lyles. The problem that you have with those guys is Alex Len is at $4 million, Trey Lyles at $2.6 million, Terrence Davis is at $4 million. Like, if you put all 3 of those together, that's like $10.5 million. Like, you can go get a $12 million, $13 million player, and that's where I think that's what separates those guys, their expiring contracts. And so I think it would be tough to waive an Alex Len, even if you don't need him, because I don't think they do need him. If you're going to walk into the season, people forget, man, Rashawn Holmes is under contract for 3 more years.
Right.
3 more. Like, you still owe Rashawn Holmes upwards of like $38 million. So, like, that's a player who is going to play. And Alex Len doesn't really factor into for me into, the actual gameplay this season, especially when you have Neemias. And I think you can pull Neemias up if you need to. If I knew Sabonis was going to be out for a long period, Neemias is getting those minutes over Alex Len, with Rashawn Holmes, in my opinion, because I think you can run the ball through him.
I was going to say, Rashawn Holmes first and foremost, but yeah. Okay.
So that's how I would look at it, and you have the ability to bring up Neemias for up to 50 games, and so I get it.
You can also go small, and that's the thing where I think people forget. Like if Sabonis goes down, to me it's Rashawn. You're relying more on Chimezie if he's still on your team. And you just kind of go smaller with a lineup. I think it vastly changes kind of the strategy there.
Even Trey Lyles. Trey Lyles is built like a tank. Like, you can put Trey Lyles as a small ball 5 for short periods of time. Mm-hmm. I mean, it's not perfect, but he actually he's a good passer. You can run the ball through him a little bit. You can actually do some of the other sets that Sabonis actually does. So when we get back to the question at hand, I think you're right. Like Merrill, Dellavedova, those are the first 2 that I would circle and say they're going to have like an extremely difficult path to making this team. And then I'm kind of with Brenden. I think Chima Moneke, for whatever reason, whatever they see in him, they see it and they want him here. And I think his ability to play the 3 and the 4, to bounce back and forth between those 2 positions, and to I mean, he will be able to defend a little bit at this level at both of those positions. He gives you some excitement. He's not a great shooter or anything, but I think betting on a guy like KZ Okpala at 23 years old over a guy like Chimezi Metu, who's 25, 26, and even I think that the question mark has to be made about is Kent Bazemore, and we talk about Dellavedova, is there anything left? But Bazemore had an absolutely atrocious season for the Lakers last season. And, is there still, does he care more about, he's got other things going on outside of basketball. And I don't blame him. He's made a lot of money. Is he still a viable NBA player? And, I like Bazemore and I like having him around the team, but I also like a 6'8", super athlete with a 7'2" wingspan who averaged 19 points a game in college and has never got a chance to show what he can do at the NBA level, like KZ Okpala. Maybe he doesn't deserve it, but maybe he does. Maybe you do find a diamond in the rough, and I like the potential there. So I think it's a little more that last roster spot. It's probably a little bit more like 3 players, possibly 4 players that are in the discussion. So yeah, I think it's good stuff. I mean, I definitely think that the Kings are gonna. Mike Brown has a lot of decisions to make there.
Do you guys think that?
We didn't talk about this last week because I'm not sure
What were
when
you
it
saying,
came
Brendan?
out. But
Brendan, what were you saying?
Yeah, real quick. Do you guys think that like Kata or
lose Wi-Fi.
Ellis?
Oh look,
Oh,
hey,
I thought that
back.
might be the case.
we're back. Yeah,
We're losing James. He didn't hear you at first.
yeah. What'd you say, Brendan?
do you guys think that Kata or Ellis could be left on the outside and someone like Monecki moves into a two-way spot?
No.
I don't think so. Well, in Ellis's case, no. In Kata's case, probably not. So if I was to prioritize them, I'd say Ellis is higher than Kata. But I don't think so.
I think they're high on both of them. Like everything I heard last season during the year was that a lot of people around the team were high on Kata, on his long-term potential, but they knew that he was going to be a couple-of-year project.
Now, if they make a move, as we've been talking about, and let's say someone like Alex Len is gone, then yeah, I mean, I think that's entirely possible. I don't know that it's Chima. I mean, that could be somebody else, but I think it's possible.
Interesting. Yeah, I think that where I was going to segue to when I don't know what happened, I shut off for like 2 seconds, was the Harrison Barnes rumor that I think this segues us into 2 different topics, but Phoenix Suns, that there was potential for a deal, and the Kings waited and waited for the Kevin Durant situation to get figured out, and when it didn't get figured out, the Suns went back to them and said, hey, let's do this Harrison Barnes deal. Number one, we don't know the players that were involved. We don't know what the potential was there. At least I haven't heard anything concrete outside of like speculation of Cam Johnson and maybe like the expiring contract of Dario Saric. But like, what were your thoughts on that one, Sean? Like, I mean, Harrison Barnes in Phoenix makes a ton of sense.
No, it does. Not only does it make a lot of sense, you can see why. I mean, especially for a team that feels that they've been to the NBA Finals and this guy can certainly help them. I understood why they did it. I just didn't know. In my opinion, I didn't think that there could be enough that Sacramento could get back. It's not like I don't think Phoenix. They don't really have any. They've already traded all their picks and everything. Like, there's a team that famously doesn't value picks, but the one guy on the team that I kind of raised some eyebrows with was maybe a Landry Shamet kind of deal, but I don't think that Phoenix would want to move that with Chris Paul at his advanced age, and they try to wrap him up in safety, bubble wrap, and keep him properly formaldehyded and all that stuff. Like you just want to keep him preserved because this dude is he does so much for that team, and if he goes down, then it gets a little bleak. So I thought possibly something with Landry Shamet could be involved, but that was all speculation. I understood why Phoenix would want him. You can see him where he was gonna. You could certainly see where he'd play a fit, but he's the guy, man. Like him and Rashawn Holmes, I think a lot of people had just written off as won't be here. And here they are. It's always that. Well, what if they are? And here they are, coming about you're less than 2 weeks from starting camp, and both of them are on the roster.
Yeah, Brendan, was there a deal that you liked?
I mean, if Cam Johnson is on the table, I would do that right away. Personally, I think that
he's also on rookie scale though.
Yeah, but he's
Right.
not going forward. Like he is this year, but then they know they're gonna have to pay him.
And restricted next year. Yeah, which is maybe a potential reason that he could become available, or maybe that's like what this deal was based around. And if that's the case, I'm doing that personally right away for Cam Johnson. You get a little younger, and I think you just hope that Cam Johnson can be a Harrison Barnes, but it's about the team control in my mind in that swap. But after that, like you mentioned Dario Saric, that's somewhat interesting to me. He just
but I
has
think
not
he's
looked the
done.
same since he's went down. Yeah. I think
Done.
Crowder, like, is there a Jay Crowder in a first round pick from Phoenix? Like, I consider it. I think that's just about getting a first rounder for HB before he walks for nothing this offseason. I think that's where my mind would be at with that. So no, it's really Cam Johnson, Jay Crowder that stand out to me there. Like if Torrey Craig is a throw in there as well, or maybe a little bit more than a throw in. I think we're talking about trying to figure out a backup 3. Could that be something like? So I think that Jay Crowder and Cam Johnson are the two that stand out to me. And if there's like a first round pick involved, it is pretty tempting to me. Functioning from the standpoint of like HB totally could end up just walking for nothing.
Yeah, I have a tough time with like Landry Shamet. He's owed $40 million over the next 4 years. Like 42. That's a lot of money for
money.
Shamet. And then Crowder's only he's under contract for 10.2 this season, and then you'd lose him. So Cam Johnson has a $8 million qualifying offer for next season. And then most of their players outside of that, so you talk about like a Torrey Craig or, they've got some other guys. They brought in Josh Okogie, Damian Lee. Like all those guys are on 1 year deals. And, even Dario Saric hit 9.2 million is a 1 year deal. I mean, like Phoenix is a team I have talked to for sure because I like, again, Cam Johnson's an interesting player. I think the one problem is he's more of a 4 than he is a 3. And then you'd have 2 guys that were like that are more of a 4 than a 3 in him and Keegan. But I think it's definitely, that's a team that I would circle back to and say, okay, what would this look like? And I think that that brings us to the business of basketball. So
Wait, hold on. There you go. Do that. That's waiting for you to do the sounder.
the business of basketball.
Thank you.
Yeah, like I don't think we can talk about the Phoenix Suns right now without discussing at least like cursory. And we won't spend a ton of time on this, but that's what I always think, and then we do. But the Robert Sarver situation, and like, look, this thing has been brewing for a couple of years. Like, and I know people around the league. Sean knows people around the league. Even Brendan, you got to have friends around the league. I know people that have worked for the Suns, and just like the environment that was created there by him, it's pretty stunning that we see the league. I think they kind of like they chose poorly. Like they didn't go all in on the penalty for what he had done, and I'm kind of surprised. And I want to get your guys' thoughts. But it's, to me, I'll say this, like, being an NBA owner, you're a steward of a franchise. The franchise will last longer than you. It will be there after you're gone. And maybe your family members take over or whatever. But you have, like, a responsibility to be a good business owner, to be a strong member of a community, someone who gives back and all that stuff. And it just seems like there's so much, like, that the NBA was able to go out and all the Baxter Holmes stuff, like, they were able to prove out and then more. And, times where, the league has it in their, like, their paperwork that he, like, used the N-word multiple times, 5 times, that he pulled his pants and underwear down in front of a male, like, trainer while he's getting a physical for no reason, where he talks about things that he's not supposed to talk about all the time. But it's been going on for like almost 2 decades of this stuff. Just where are you guys at with this? Because I was disappointed. A $10 million fine and a 1-year ban. I would have liked to have seen a 5-year ban. So then that way Robert Sarver would have considered selling the team. Or even a 10-year ban. Like, hey, look, we're not putting up with that stuff. But it's kind of the league where we're at right now, where they don't take that kind of stand.
I'll be honest, I was surprised. I was surprised that the league wasn't more forceful against one of their governors, and one that has a bit of a track record in how they treat people. I think the investigation was thorough. I've read most of the report. It's a tough read. It really is. If anyone's read, I think, someone had said something at a media gathering recently where it's like, now we rely on other people to aggregate and condense what what that report is and kind of just put out the bullet points. But it's a tough read, man. And it, I think, in my opinion, based off what I read in the report, I see enough of, hey, this guy's an asshole, he should be gone. The league has no room for somebody like this. And it's a difference. There is a stark difference between him and Donald Sterling. I will say that, but we're not trying to compare King of the Assholes here. This guy's a dick. This guy should not be here. And so, I think it came out. I think especially when you look at someone like LeBron James, who's essentially the face of your league for the better part of 2 decades, really. And he's saying the league got this wrong. I'm inclined to believe him. I kind of agree with him. I think $10 million in a 1-year suspension, like, what does that really do to a guy who I know has been, labeled notoriously cheap and frugal throughout his reign as a governor in Phoenix? So much so, I have my own story about sitting next to him at a Kings game at Old Arco and seeing that he has a flip phone. I'm like, you're a freaking millionaire, almost billionaire, with a flip phone, sir. Like, why? And he says, oh, my kids always give me, grief about it, blah, blah, blah. Like, they're embarrassed by it. It was like, so that was the thing that had really hovered around Robert Sarver forever, was just his frugalness as an owner in this league.
Did he have one of those belt harnesses for his flip phone?
Yeah,
like click in?
Like a Motorola.
Those are too expensive.
Motorola 2-way. But that was what was really known. And now you see just really how he treats people, and there's no shortage of people, now who throughout this investigation are coming up and saying what's happened, saying that they've seen, and maybe it's a lack of proof on the league's part. I don't really know, but to me, it feels dirty. It feels like they got this one wrong, and I don't think it's a means to an end. Somebody had put that to me the other day, that a $10 million fine and a 1-year suspension, perhaps Sarver will read the room. I said, read the room? With respect, the guy put out a statement, but also put out a statement with some PR team put together a background information regarding his statement. So, like, you have this background of facts leading up to Robert Sarver's statement, because his statement was so, in my opinion, dismissive. And he's saying, he disagrees with the league, disagrees with all these things, and because of that statement, somebody had to come up and say, well, no, these actually things had happened, or these things, here's why he feels this way. I don't really know what the background for the statement served. I didn't think it served him any favor. But again, I think that someone told me that maybe Sarver will read the room and perhaps step down. And I just, man, I don't see that. I really don't see. He's dismissive within this statement. I don't see. Granted, there's going to be backlash now when you've got the likes of LeBron James, media like us, fans who are going to sit there and say, no, this isn't good enough. I think there are people that are going to say this is fine, that they don't know enough about it, and that's fine. But I think maybe they are betting on the backlash against Robert Sarver and public pressure and influence, people of influence pushing back on it, and then maybe he'll just read the room and bow out. And now you've got Baxter, reporting that this guy who's going to be the Sam Garvin, who's going to fill in as the governor in the meantime. Boy, I don't know, man. I don't see what good this does. I don't see how this benefits the organization. I don't see how it benefits Robert Sarver. He should probably just go away.
Yeah. Brenden, I'm going to throw this at you because Adam Silver spoke on this, and he kind of got tongue-tied. Like, he almost felt like Adam Silver wasn't ready for the question. Like, it was almost like, and he said, like, well, one of the big differences, like, we had players that wouldn't play for Donald Sterling coming out and saying, like, we're not going to play for Donald Sterling. Okay, well, what happens now? Like, what if a handful of the Suns say, hey, look, dude's got to go. We can't play.
Chris Paul tweeted something out.
Well, yeah, but where was that before? And why didn't they go and ask some of those players before? Like, how big of an issue is this for you? And maybe they did, but I kind of felt like watching Adam Silver with our friend Howard Beck, like, going at him. He was taken aback, like, what seems to be the problem here? Why are we escalating this? Like, we hit him with $10 million in a year. It's like, no, man, I think everybody wants 10 times both of those numbers. Hit him with $100 million, hit him with 10 years. Like, get him out of the league. Like, there's no room for that here. There's no basis for that. So do you think that the players should even be part of this conversation?
I mean, yeah, I think that they should be talked to, and I think it's really telling that Chris Paul, like James or Sean mentioned, LeBron coming out and saying something. I think Chris Paul coming out as somebody who's the star of that team and also the president of the Players Association.
He was. He's no longer.
Was. Gotcha.
Yeah. It's now CJ McCollum.
And let me pick that up real quick, Brenden. Just a quick interjection. Chris Paul came out and condemned it, but he didn't use language like LeBron did, was saying there's no place in this league for this guy. Like Chris Paul, he works for Robert Sarver. He's on his team. He didn't come out and say, I'm not going to play for this guy. Like the Clippers did famously in Oakland, where they were taking off their jackets and not showing a Clippers logo because Donald Sterling was in power. I was at that playoff game, and it spoke loudly. And you had guys who came out very loudly saying, I don't want to play for Donald Sterling. Those comments matter. And Chris Paul, to his credit, I know he only put out 2 tweets. He never said that. So I just want to draw a little bit of a line there, because that's a president of the Players Association just as early as a year ago. Was it maybe 2 years ago?
I think it was a year. It was just a year ago. I mean, he's still one of the, like, after LeBron, it's probably Chris Paul.
It's Chris, yeah.
Is the most powerful player in the league. And before, I mean, the dude went in and had the like over 35 rule change just for himself, basically, him and LeBron. Like, he went in and became the president of the Players Union. Hey, we're going to change this new CBA. That's not going to happen. We need to get paid after 35. Like,
right.
Okay.
Well, and if LeBron's out there just saying there's no place in there's no room for guys like this in the league. And I was kind of surprised that Chris Paul didn't say those things. Sorry, Brenden. Go ahead.
No, you're good. That's definitely a good clarity to make for sure. And just the whole situation is just gross. All the like racist, misogynistic comments, it's all gross. And for like Sam Amick did a really good piece on it and highlighted how the Suns HR department has been historically ineffective. And just like that work environment must be horrible for everyone there to not have someone that you can go and talk to about these issues. Even it is just a horrible environment. And the Adam Silver presser that you mentioned was one of the weirdest things I've ever seen. Like, Silver, like you said, looked almost unprepared or like shocked by the reaction. And he had a comment that he effectively said, like, old owners are held to a different standard. And it's like, I get that's somewhat just the reality of it, but also, and then there was a clarifying comment made by the NBA after the hand that that's not what he meant. Like, sure. But I think that I get how that's like the gross reality of it, that these owners are just going to have more power, but there should be something done here. And my understanding is that like he only could be forced to sell if 3/4 of the other NBA owners voted to do so. And maybe that's where this got hung up, but I think the other owners should absolutely be on board with this because this is a horrible look. And it's just shocking. Like this has been an 18-year period, and Adam Silver kind of worded it as if, oh, well, these things happened at the beginning of his tenure. He hasn't been bad forever. I think he's improved as a person, evolved as a person over that 18-year period, and much of the behavior in question stems from the beginning of his tenure. And it's like, I don't really care. Like,
I'd also throw out
gross.
there too, like, yeah, I'd also throw out there too, like, to me, it's a way for other owners to really kind of get their shit together, like their houses in order. Like, oh, this happened to Sarver, and is there a lot of proof? No, there's really not, especially on the racism stuff like that. You've got it's a he said she said kind of thing, but the treatment towards women within the report seems to be vastly well known, and that's to me equally as gross and terrible. And
Yeah.
I think to me it's an opportunity for a lot of these owners to really check themselves and look at their organizations. And you would have hoped that they did so with the Dallas Mavericks situation, with all the stuff that had come out of Dallas Mavericks over the past really 5 years with harassment in the workplace and things like that. I think there's a lot of owners who are now looking themselves at their organizations with a fine-tooth comb and trying to root out some of these poor behaviors, because this can bring your organization down. And
Let's see,
again,
Sean.
but then there's the disappointment of it. I had to catch myself because the penalty on this case was not good. But my point is there could be more egregious cases within the NBA at other teams, and that's going to cause them to really take a fine look at their own organizations, because there probably there could be things that are, I'm trying to be careful how I say this. there are likely other NBA teams that have even worse moments that have greater proof, if you will, if people were to come and investigate them. So getting your own house in order is definitely something you'd have to do, regardless of the penalty that came down to Phoenix.
And I'm just going to say this. We're talking about here, it's legal precedents. What the other 29 owners are not going to do is set up legal precedents for them to be removed for having a history of stuff like this. And I'm not saying that every owner in the league has a history of stuff like this, but I guarantee you that if you need is it a 2/3 vote or a 3/4 vote?
3/4.
You're gonna have enough people who look at it and go, yeah, I'm not setting that precedent. You got a guy like Mark Cuban who his house was not in order, where it was run like there was a bunch of nefarious stuff going on. I mean, didn't we have the Philadelphia 76ers had like a situation? There are these situations that happen, but if you vote out one of your guys, you're sort of breaking the rule, because now like that can happen to you. You opened a floodgate. You opened a legal loophole to have you removed as an owner. And I think it does speak volumes to, like, we've heard this in the past. Oh man, if the Kings could just kick Vivek Ranadive out, like losing games is not being a bad owner. Like we need to readjust how we think of what ownership, what's good ownership, what's bad ownership. You can disagree with his politics, but what you can't disagree with the fact that they had $131 million payroll. He sunk, hundreds of millions of his and his ownership's money into building the Doco and the arena and Sawyer Hotel, and the entire downtown area has been revitalized. These are things, like, again, you can have a much worse owner than a guy who just happens to lose 9 seasons in a row to start his tenure. And I think people should appreciate that, and hope that he figures it out and becomes a better owner when it comes to that stuff. But at least he's not going to be on the wrong side of history on a lot of this stuff like Robert Sarver has been.
Yeah, it's all gross.
Yeah, I was thinking about that for a minute, and I was like letting that marinate, and I go, yeah, it's pretty well said. But it's, as Brenden said, yeah, it's gross. It's unfortunate, man, and it's it's a shame it took this long, man. This stuff should have been done a
never
long
taken.
time ago. It shouldn't have been this way.
In the whole like other owners having to look in the mirror and get their house straight, like why do you need to be slapped in the face to realize don't be an prejudiced asshole? Like what is
Right.
Yeah.
Well, to the point of that, Brenden, like I think people think that enough distance that you can create from a certain, like, it just goes away, and it it doesn't take much to resurface a lot of things in past behaviors. So again, like, it shouldn't take this, and again, the penalty isn't that strict in my opinion. I think it's not good at all, but I think there's other organizations that have a history, have things that have happened to them that, if investigated, could bring forth a more severe penalty. And somehow, some way, those organizations have to deal with those things. Maybe they don't. Maybe they just keep their head in the sand and keep moving forward, and it's like, that's another organization's problem, whatever. But I don't know, man. It's unfortunate, and the Phoenix Suns and Robert Sarver are not going to be the last owner in professional sports to have to deal with something like this, and that's sad.
Yeah. And I'll say this too, Brenden, as we close this topic up. I think there's also something, we always joke around about movies and the movies that you don't know and all that stuff, right? There's a big difference in like how the world is viewed today than it was 10 years ago, 20 years ago, 30 years ago, 40 years ago, 50 years ago. And like things that were allowed to happen in the 80s and the 90s in the workplace that aren't allowed to happen in the workplace now. I mean, it's crazy, the things that happen in the workplace in the 80s and 90s, even the 2000s. There are plenty of things that went on that just had been part of the culture of corporate business, or a culture of male female like work environment. Like, it's just, I think we're cleaning up a lot of this stuff, and so maybe this is like a bit of house cleaning for the NBA. But also, I think what Sean keeps pointing to, it's a wake-up call. The rest of the league has to be like, okay, well, we need to make sure that this thing is clean. We need to make sure that we're doing the right type of hiring, that we're balanced, we're fair, we're looking at things the right way. We don't have to be just, you can't be who you were 20 years ago or 10 years ago. You got to be better. And so I think that's where we're heading with this whole thing. So, like, hopefully the Sarver thing is hopefully he leaves, but if not, hopefully it forces change. And if not, it opens up a thing where, like, he's got 2 strikes right now. If anything else happens, like, you can only imagine that he'll be run out of the league so fast. And we'll go into litigation and everything else. So,
do you guys think the ruling could change or update at all at this point, or no?
No, I don't.
Yeah, it's
I think it's by design. I think they don't. I think this is it's all about precedent, and I think
it is.
That's it. You don't want to succumb to public pressures and all those things, like, because then it makes you look like, oh well, we screwed up, we need to do this. It's like, no, this is your decision. You got to live with it. You have to sleep in this bed. You've tied yourself to the hip to supporting this owner still. And again, like, you're not trying to. I think people hear that, and you don't need to compare it to Donald Sterling. Donald Sterling was an awful monster of a human being. You don't need to, like, but that doesn't mean that Robert Sarver, even though less of a monster, you don't need to compare them. Like, it should be unacceptable. Period. Like, full stop. Like, that just should not happen. And
yeah,
even if you don't have. I mean, it's kind of one of those situations in corporate America where you have a CEO and maybe that person wasn't totally responsible for it, but they fall on the sword because ultimately they're responsible for the actions of their employees in the organization. And this owner has a lot of, right. It's you have one of those, in law enforcement where somebody has to step down as the actions of somebody else. It's like, no, man, maybe that's what you should have done, and maybe they were banking on that, and maybe there is still time of that, but I don't see it happening based off of who this guy is. Yeah. And you can tell by his quote, he tells you who he is. He's going to be dismissive and defiant, and that's a shame.
Yeah. All right, let's wrap this thing up. Brenden, do you have any final thoughts?
I am ready for the season to start. It feels like it's been a very long off season, and that's probably because the last two, I think two, maybe more, were shorter. So this was like a more typical off season, and I guess I'm gonna have to be better prepared next off season and ways to entertain myself. But I'm ready for this to get started, guys.
Sean, what do you got for us?
We're embarking on fall. I was gone when it was 115 or 17 or whatever the hell you guys had to deal with. And in Orlando, I never thought I was be happier to be in a humidity state of 90 degrees and have it be so great. But I come back and it's kind of cold again in the Sacramento area, which is great because, well, I mean, it's sad for me because I always say as baseball season comes to an end, so does my love, because I love all the weather during baseball season, spring, summer, and now we're getting the fall. But I must say, I was at the grocery store, and people, I know you love your pumpkin spice garbage. It's everywhere, man. Like, you can buy pumpkin spice bread, Cheerios. Like, I thought it was just I'm not someone who enjoys pumpkin, by the way, but, like, I thought it was just a Starbucks thing, man. Like, this is, where do you draw the line? Like, is someone who doesn't understand pumpkin spice, I don't like it. Must we have it in our cereal? Like, what is going on?
That's random, Sean.
Everything pumpkin spice there is, and bring it to you immediately.
That's random.
You asked me my final thoughts. That's all I had. I was literally, right. I've been pondering this for like 2 days going, good God, man. Are you going to get like are you going to go to like your fast food establishment and get a burger that's pumpkin spice burger? Dude, there you go. Pumpkin spice burger. Go get one.
Oh.
That sounds awful.
Yeah, I'm not a pumpkin spice guy. Okay, let me see. I'll finish
Next
with
episode
this.
of the Kings Beat podcast, sponsored by Pumpkin Spice Real Estate.
There it
Pumpkin
is.
spice tacos. Jesus Christ.
Oh, no.
That's not
horrible.
happening.
Okay, so my final thoughts. We're going to have updated boosters for the upcoming NBA season. I got my booster this weekend. It absolutely kicked my hiney. So I just tell people, number one, don't shy away from getting your booster. But if you've had an adverse reaction to the boosters in the past, expect to be down for like 24 to 48 hours. So just work that into your calculus of when you're getting your shot. So maybe like a Friday afternoon or a Sunday morning, so you can take a day off of work or something. But yeah, it was unpleasant. I'll say that. I got the body aches and chills for like 2 days. Outside of that, the smoke is cleared, which is good. Hopefully no one out there has been impacted too greatly by the fires, especially the mosquito fires up here by us. Absolutely crazy. Air quality, we were like well above 400 for like most of a week and a half. So we're back to slightly normal. I don't know, a little bit better. So anyway, stay safe, everybody. Do what you can to be good people, and if you can get your booster, go get your booster, because I think this is going to be an interesting flu season. Cool. I think that's going to do it for this episode of the Kings Beat podcast. Thanks for joining us. We'll have an announcement soon on the upcoming Kings Off the Record with the Kings Beat virtual happy hour. Make sure to subscribe to the Kings Beat. Make sure to go follow all the good work that these guys are doing at both Brenden at the Kings Herald and the Kings Pulse podcast, and Sean just killing it over at Fox 40 with Chris Tavares. So that's going to do it for this edition of the Kings Beat podcast for Sean Cunningham and Brenden Nunes. I'm James Ham. Good seeing you guys. See you next week.